There are stories that remind us money can buy many things, but trust and loyalty are priceless. And this story, set in the heart of New York City, will leave you questioning how much honesty is truly worth. Imagine a billionaire father, a little girl living with challenges most can't even imagine, and a humble nanny who carried the weight of love and responsibility on her shoulders. But when the millionaire decided to put her to the ultimate test, no one expected what would happen next, and it shocked everyone. Jonathan Reynolds was a man who had everything. From a sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park to luxury cars lined up in his private garage, he had built an empire that made him one of the most respected and envied men in the city. But behind the walls of wealth and privilege lay a fragile truth. Jonathan's heart beat for only one reason: his daughter. Emma was 10 years old, born with a disability that required her to use a wheelchair. She was bright, curious, and full of life, but her condition made her vulnerable in ways Jonathan often felt powerless to protect. Since his wife had passed away years earlier, Jonathan had devoted himself to giving Emma the best of everything: private tutors, the best doctors, even a playroom filled with toys from around the world. Yet, despite his immense wealth, Jonathan knew money couldn't buy his daughter the one thing she needed most: genuine love and care. That's where Maria came in. She wasn't wealthy, she wasn't glamorous, but she was warm, kind, and patient. A young woman from a modest background in Queens, Maria had stepped into their lives as Emma's nanny and quickly became the heartbeat of the Reynolds home. She treated Emma not as a job, but as family, reading to her, laughing with her, and defending her when other children at school mocked her disability. To Emma, Maria wasn't just a nanny, she was her safe place. Jonathan had seen all of this with his own eyes. Yet deep down, he carried a seed of doubt. His wealth had made him cautious, suspicious even. Too many people in his life had proven to be driven by greed. Friends who betrayed him, business partners who stole, even distant relatives who resurfaced only when they wanted money. And though Maria had done nothing to suggest dishonesty, Jonathan's heart carried a constant fear. What if she, too, was only here because of what he had? It was this fear that led Jonathan to make a decision many would consider extreme. One evening, while Emma was asleep and Maria was tidying the living room, Jonathan quietly unlocked the massive steel vault hidden behind the wood-paneled walls of his study. Inside lay millions of dollars in cash, bonds, and priceless jewels, a fortune that represented decades of hard work. Normally, Jonathan guarded it with utmost secrecy. But that night, he deliberately left the vault door slightly open, the glowing light spilling into the hallway like a lure. He wanted to know the truth. Was Maria the loyal, selfless woman Emma believed her to be? Or was she just another person waiting for the right moment to take advantage of his trust? Jonathan retreated to a hidden corner of the study where he could observe without being seen. His heart raced as he heard Maria's footsteps approaching. She hummed softly, carrying Emma's favorite blanket in her arms when she stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes caught the gleam of the open vault. Jonathan held his breath. This was the moment. Maria stood frozen for a moment, clearly realizing what she was seeing. Anyone else might have stepped closer, curiosity pulling them in, hands itching to touch the stacks of cash or the glittering diamonds. But Maria did something Jonathan didn't expect. She glanced down at the blanket in her arms, then walked past the vault without a second look, heading straight to Emma's room to tuck her in. Jonathan's chest tightened. She hadn't even hesitated. No greed, no temptation, just focus on the child she cared for. But he wasn't done. This was only the beginning of a test that would push Maria's loyalty to its limits. And as Jonathan leaned back in his chair, a mix of guilt and curiosity swirling inside him, he realized something. Whatever happened next would change their lives forever. Would you walk past an open vault filled with millions, or would curiosity get the best of you? Stay tuned, because what Maria does next will leave you speechless. And don't forget, if this story already has your heart racing, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this video with someone who believes loyalty is worth more than gold. The following morning, the Reynolds penthouse seemed as normal as ever. Emma was already awake, her laughter echoing down the hallway as Maria brushed her hair and chatted about the day ahead. Jonathan watched them from the doorway, his mind restless with what he had witnessed the night before. Maria had walked past the open vault without a second glance, but Jonathan's suspicion hadn't disappeared. If anything, it had grown more complicated. He kept asking himself, was it genuine loyalty? Or was it simply a matter of timing? Maybe she hadn't entered the vault because Emma needed her. Maybe later, when the opportunity was easier, she might act differently. The question gnawed at him like a splinter. He couldn't remove Dot, so Jonathan decided to continue the test. That evening, once Emma was asleep, he repeated the ritual. The vault door left open, the glow of treasure spilling into the dark hallway. And again, Jonathan positioned himself where he could observe without being noticed. Maria came by a little later, carrying a small basket of laundry. As she approached, Jonathan studied her carefully, every movement under a magnifying glass. Once again, she saw the vault. She paused. This time, she walked a few steps closer, placing the laundry basket down as if to rest her arms. Jonathan's heart pounded. Would this be the moment? Maria tilted her head slightly, peering at the stacks of money and jewels. For a brief second, Jonathan thought he saw temptation in her eyes, but then something unexpected happened. She picked up the laundry basket and quietly closed the vault door with her free hand, making sure the latch clicked into place. She sighed as if annoyed, then muttered softly to herself, "He must have forgotten again." Jonathan froze. He wasn't sure whether to feel relief or shame. She hadn't only resisted, she had protected his fortune, guarding it as if it were her own responsibility. He couldn't believe it. But still, part of him whispered doubts. Was she closing it to avoid suspicion, to keep him from realizing she noticed? Over the next week, Jonathan pushed the test further. Sometimes he left smaller valuables lying around: gold watches, expensive pens, even a diamond bracelet on the kitchen counter. Each time, Maria handled them with the same care she showed Emma's toys. If she found them, she returned them directly to Jonathan, usually with a gentle scolding. "You shouldn't be careless with things like this," she'd say. "You never know who might come in and take advantage." Her words struck Jonathan deeply. He knew she was right. He had been careless, not with objects, but with trust. He had become so consumed by suspicion that he couldn't see the truth standing right in front of him. Meanwhile, Emma continued to blossom under Maria's care. One afternoon, Jonathan returned home early from work and found them in the playroom. Emma sat in her wheelchair, clapping her hands as Maria spun around, singing a silly song that filled the room with laughter. Jonathan hadn't heard his daughter laugh like that in years. For the first time in a long while, the penthouse felt alive, not with the sterile weight of wealth, but with love. Still, Jonathan wasn't ready to admit defeat. He decided on one final test. Something bigger, something impossible to fake. He would leave the vault wide open during the day, when Maria believed she was completely alone in the penthouse with Emma. He wanted to see her most natural, unguarded reaction. So, one Saturday morning, after pretending to leave for a business meeting, Jonathan slipped out quietly and circled back to his hidden spot in the study. The vault door stood wide open, the fortune gleaming brighter than ever. From his position, Jonathan could see everything. Minutes later, Maria entered, holding Emma's hand as they moved slowly down the hallway. Emma spotted the vault first, her little eyes widening. "Maria, what's that?" she asked innocently. Maria crouched down beside her, her voice gentle but serious. "That's a vault, sweetie. It holds very important things, but they don't belong to us. They belong to your daddy, and we should never touch what isn't ours." Emma tilted her head. "But why is it open? Won't someone steal it?" Maria smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face. "That's why we're here, aren't we? To protect what's precious. Your daddy works very hard for this. But do you know what's even more precious than money?" Emma's eyes sparkled. "What?" Maria hugged her tightly. You are worth more than anything in that vault." Jonathan's eyes burned with tears as he watched from the shadows. He hadn't expected those words. He hadn't expected his test to reveal not just honesty, but love, a kind of love that couldn't be bought, only given freely. Yet he remained silent, torn between relief and guilt. He had put Maria to the harshest of tests, and she had passed every single one. But what he didn't realize was that his test was far from over. Because soon, something would happen that no amount of money, no locked vault, could prepare him for. Would you choose loyalty if no one was watching? Maria proved her heart was pure, but fate was about to throw a challenge even bigger than money. And what happens next will leave you breathless. Stay tuned, and don't forget to share this story if it touched your heart. Jonathan sat in his study late that night, his mind racing. He couldn't shake Maria's words from earlier in the day. You are worth more than anything in that vault. He had heard many people flatter him throughout his life, investors, business partners, employees, but no one had ever spoken with such sincerity about his daughter. The realization made his chest tighten, not with pride, but with shame that all this time he had doubted her. He had left traps, scattered bait, questioned her intentions. And yet, Maria had responded with integrity at every turn, never once wavering, never once even giving him a hint of greed. Instead, she had shown love, patience, and protection, not just for his fortune, but for Emma, who needed it most. Still, Jonathan was a man conditioned by years of betrayal and business rivalries. He had seen trusted friends become enemies, watched partners turn on him for money. His fortune had built walls around his heart, and tearing them down wasn't easy. Something in him whispered that he needed one final confirmation, something undeniable. The answer came unexpectedly one Tuesday morning. Jonathan received a call from his financial advisor about a potential merger. It would require him to fly out to Chicago immediately. He hated leaving Emma, but it was necessary. He instructed Maria to watch over her closely, knowing full well that this would be another test. This time, not a staged one, but a real-life situation where his absence would show him the truth. That afternoon, while Jonathan was still at the airport, preparing for his flight, chaos erupted in the penthouse. A group of workers had come to do maintenance on the building's security systems. One of them, however, wasn't who he claimed to be. Hidden under a worker's uniform, a man with darker intentions had slipped through the penthouse door. His eyes landing on the open vault Jonathan had carelessly left unlocked in his rush to leave. Maria was in the kitchen with Emma when she heard a noise down the hall. At first, she thought it was the workers, but something in her gut told her otherwise. She gently placed a hand on Emma's shoulder and whispered, "Stay here, sweetie. Don't move." Quietly, she stepped into the hallway and froze. The man was standing inside the vault, stuffing cash into a duffel bag. Maria's heart pounded. This was no accident. This was theft in broad daylight. She could have panicked. She could have turned away and pretended not to see. She could have even joined him, taking a share of the money and disappearing forever. But instead, Maria's first thought was Emma. She rushed back into the kitchen, scooped Emma into her arms, and locked the door behind them. Then, thinking quickly, she grabbed her phone and dialed security. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "There's a man in Mr. Reynolds' vault. You need to come now." But before help could arrive, the thief realized he wasn't alone. He banged on the kitchen door, shouting threats. Maria hugged Emma tightly, whispering calm reassurances, shielding the little girl's ears from the sound of rage on the other side of the door. Minutes felt like hours. Just when Maria thought the door would break, security guards stormed in. The thief was caught and restrained, the stolen money spilling onto the floor. Maria collapsed into a chair, still clutching Emma, her body trembling from the adrenaline. Jonathan returned later that evening, unaware of the near disaster that had taken place. When the head of security briefed him, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Maria had risked herself to protect Emma. She hadn't thought of the money, not once. Every action she took was for his daughter's safety. That night, Jonathan stood by Emma's bed as she slept, Maria sitting quietly by her side. He wanted to say something, to apologize, to thank her, but the words stuck in his throat. For the first time in years, he was speechless. And yet, despite everything that had happened, Maria remained humble. She didn't boast, didn't act as though she had done something extraordinary. To her, it was simple. "Emma comes first," she said softly, when Jonathan finally found the courage to speak. Jonathan walked back to his study, his eyes falling once again on the vault. The millions inside suddenly felt meaningless. For years, he had thought his fortune was what needed protection. But now he realized the truth. It was Emma, her happiness, her innocence, and the love of those who surrounded her. And Maria had given him something no money could ever buy: trust. But Jonathan still hadn't revealed his secret. He had never told Maria that the open vault was a test. He had never confessed his doubts or admitted how far he had gone to measure her loyalty. And he knew that when the moment came, that revelation might change everything. Because what happens when someone discovers they've been tested all along? Would Maria forgive him? Or would the truth break the fragile trust they had built? Maria proved her courage in ways Jonathan never expected. But the secret of the open vault still hung in the air like a ticking time bomb. How would she react when she discovered the truth? Would she forgive or walk away forever? Stay tuned, because what happens next will shock everyone. The following days were unlike any Jonathan had experienced in years. He found himself lingering in the living room more often, quietly watching Maria and Emma interact. What struck him most was the laughter, the kind of laughter he hadn't heard from his daughter in so long. Emma's giggles rang through the penthouse like music, lightening the heavy silence that usually filled its halls. Maria didn't treat Emma like she was fragile porcelain or a burden to be managed. She danced with her in her wheelchair, turning mundane afternoons into joyful celebrations. She read her stories with different voices, making Emma squeal with delight. She even convinced Emma to try painting, filling the walls of the playroom with bright colors and whimsical drawings. Every time Jonathan saw his daughter smile, a pang of guilt twisted deeper in his chest. Because while Maria had given so much of herself, he had been holding back, watching her with suspicion, laying traps, doubting her loyalty. And now, after everything she had done, it felt almost unforgivable. One evening, Jonathan sat in his study, staring at the glowing city skyline. A crystal glass of whiskey sat untouched on his desk. He thought about his late wife, Rebecca. She had always believed in seeing the best in people, in giving them chances. "Trust is a gift, Jonathan," she used to say, "but it's also a choice." If Rebecca were still here, she would have welcomed Maria without question. Jonathan knew that, and the thought weighed on him like a stone pressing on his chest. His phone buzzed. It was an email from the head of security, reporting that all stolen money from the attempted robbery had been recovered. No loss at all. Jonathan chuckled bitterly. The millions had been saved, yes, but not by cameras, guards, or vaults. They had been saved because Maria cared more about Emma than anything else. Later that night, Jonathan overheard something that nearly broke him. Passing by Emma's bedroom door, He paused when he heard Maria's voice softly speaking. She was tucking Emma in, her words tender and reassuring. "You're the bravest girl I know," Maria whispered. "Never forget that you are loved, Emma. Your daddy loves you more than he can ever say." Jonathan's throat tightened. He hadn't realized how often he failed to say those words himself. Maria was filling gaps he hadn't even noticed existed. And worse still, he had been testing her loyalty while she had been pouring unconditional love into his daughter. The secret gnawed at him day and night. He replayed every moment the vault left open, the careful glances to see if she would take something, the temptation he had dangled like bait. It all seemed so cruel now. How could he have doubted someone who had only shown kindness and honesty? One morning, Maria caught Jonathan watching her while she prepared breakfast. She smiled, offering him a plate. "You should eat, Mr. Reynolds. You're always working too much." For a brief moment, Jonathan almost confessed everything. The words were on his tongue, but fear held him back. What if she felt betrayed? What if she walked out, leaving Emma devastated? Instead, he forced a small smile and muttered, "Thank you, Maria." But inside, the pressure was building. Jonathan was a man used to control of his company, of his fortune, of his image. Yet this one secret had begun to unravel him. To make matters more complicated, Emma's bond with Maria had become inseparable. She clung to her nanny's side, her happiness radiating in ways Jonathan hadn't seen since Rebecca's passing. Losing Maria now would mean losing Emma's newfound joy. And Jonathan knew that when the truth finally surfaced, it wouldn't just be Maria's trust at stake, it would be Emma's heart too. The guilt became unbearable one night when Emma woke from a nightmare. Jonathan rushed into her room, only to find Maria already there, gently holding Emma's hand, soothing her fears with calm words. Jonathan stood in the doorway, watching silently. Emma eventually drifted back to sleep, her breathing steady and peaceful. Maria glanced up and noticed Jonathan, her expression warm but tired. "She just needed someone to remind her she's safe," Maria whispered. Jonathan nodded, but his chest ached. Safe. That was what Maria had given Emma: safety, trust, and love. And what had he given Maria in return? A cruel test and silence. As he walked back to his study, Jonathan knew the time was coming when he could no longer keep the truth hidden. The guilt was eating away at him, and if he didn't confess, it would destroy the fragile peace that had grown in his home. But what he didn't know was that fate was about to force his hand. Because secrets have a way of surfacing, and when Maria discovered the truth behind the open vault, the shock would change everything. Jonathan is trapped in a prison of his own making. He knows he must confess, but the fear of losing Maria and breaking his daughter's heart holds him back. What will happen when Maria learns she was tested all along? Will forgiveness be possible, or will trust be shattered forever? The storm came on a quiet Saturday morning, when the penthouse buzzed with the usual weekend calm. Emma was happily coloring at the kitchen table while Maria prepared her favorite pancakes. Jonathan sat nearby with a cup of coffee, trying to ignore the gnawing guilt that had haunted him for weeks. But fate has a way of pushing truth into the light when it's least expected. Maria reached into the hallway closet for Emma's art supplies. Something caught her eye. A folded document slipped from a shelf, the security report Jonathan had carelessly tucked away. She bent down to pick it up, intending to return it, but as her eyes skimmed the page, her hands froze. The report detailed everything: the vault left open, the hidden cameras monitoring her reactions, Jonathan's deliberate test of her honesty. It was all there in cold black ink. Maria's heart pounded. She read the words again, disbelief flooding her chest. Her mind flashed back to the night she had walked past the glowing vault, thinking nothing of it. She remembered telling Emma bedtime stories while Jonathan hid in the shadows, silently judging her. Every act of care, every moment of trust, had been weighed against suspicion. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the report, anger and hurt swelling in her throat. She turned toward Jonathan, who was sipping his coffee, blissfully unaware that the lie he'd buried so deeply had just been unearthed. "Mr. Reynolds," she said softly, her voice shaking. "What is this?" Jonathan looked up, confusion flickering across his face. When he saw the paper in her hands, his blood ran cold. The coffee cup nearly slipped from his grasp. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air, only broken by Emma humming as she colored, oblivious to the tension that had just exploded. "Maria." "I can explain," Jonathan stammered, standing quickly. But Maria's expression stopped him in his tracks. Tears welled in her eyes, not of weakness, but of betrayal. "You tested me? All this time? You didn't trust me? You thought I would steal from you?" Her voice rose, sharp with hurt. Emma looked up from her coloring, confused by the sudden tension. Jonathan's chest tightened. He tried to step closer, but Maria backed away, clutching the paper like a shield. "Do you know what it feels like to give everything to a child who isn't even your own? To treat her like family, only to discover you've been treated like a suspect in your own home?" The weight of her words sliced through the room. Emma's eyes darted between them, fear creeping into her innocent face. "Maria, Daddy, what's happening?" Maria turned toward Emma, her voice softening as she crouched beside her. "Nothing, sweetheart. Nothing you did. This is between me and your father, but the damage was done." Emma's small hands gripped Maria's tightly, as if afraid she would disappear. Jonathan's face burned with shame. "Maria, please. I didn't mean to hurt you. I've been betrayed so many times before. People have used me, lied to me, stolen from me. I thought I had to be careful. But I see now. I was wrong." Maria shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "Careful? No, you were cruel. You put me in a position I never deserved to be in. You doubted my character without reason. Do you know what that does to someone who has done nothing but be honest?" Her voice cracked, but she held her ground. Emma buried her face in Maria's shoulder, clinging to her, as if sensing she was about to lose her safe place. Jonathan's heart broke at the sight. This was the moment he had feared, the cost of his mistrust laid bare in front of him. He wanted to beg, to promise, to swear he would never doubt her again. But he knew words alone wouldn't heal the wound. Maria rose to her feet, holding Emma close. Her eyes met Jonathan's, filled with pain. "I stayed in this home because of her," she said, her voice steady now. "Because she needed me. But you saw me as a threat. Maybe I can't stay here anymore." The words struck Jonathan like a blow. He reached out instinctively, but Maria stepped back, shielding Emma. "No, Maria, please. Don't say that," Jonathan pleaded. "Emma needs you. I need you. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but don't take yourself away from her because of me." But Maria's silence was louder than any words. She turned her attention to Emma, who was crying softly now, her small voice trembling. "Maria, don't leave me." The room fell into a suffocating stillness. Jonathan stood frozen, realizing he was on the edge of losing not just Maria's trust, but also the joy she had brought into Emma's life. And in that silence, the truth became clear. Unless Jonathan found a way to make this right, he was about to lose the only two people who truly made his fortune mean anything at all. The secret is out, and Maria feels betrayed to her core. Emma clings to her nanny, terrified of losing her safe place. Can Jonathan repair the damage of his mistake, or has he destroyed the very trust he hoped to protect? Stay with us, because what happens next will leave you breathless. That night, the penthouse felt like a battlefield after a war. The walls that once echoed with laughter now carried only silence, thick and heavy. Jonathan sat alone in his study, the very room where this all began, his head buried in his hands. The report Maria had found lay torn on the desk, but shredding the paper couldn't erase the damage it had done. Every word Maria had said replayed in his mind like a haunting refrain. You were cruel. You doubted my character without reason. Jonathan had built his empire on logic and suspicion, trusting contracts more than people, numbers more than promises. But here, in his own home, that same mindset had poisoned the very thing he cherished most, the fragile happiness of his daughter. He rose and walked down the hall to Emma's room. The door was cracked open, and inside he saw Maria curled beside Emma, the little girl holding tightly onto her nanny's hand. Emma's eyes fluttered shut, but even in sleep, she refused to let go. Jonathan leaned against the doorframe, guilt pressing heavier on his chest. He wanted to step inside, to apologize again, but something stopped him. He realized he had said enough words already. Words wouldn't heal this. Only actions could. The next morning, Jonathan surprised them both. When Maria entered the kitchen with Emma, they found the table covered not in money, not in extravagant gifts, but in something simple, pancakes shaped like hearts, a bouquet of Emma's favorite daisies, and a note written in Jonathan's own hand. Trust isn't built in vaults, the note read. It's built in love. Maria, I failed you. Emma, I failed you too. Let me try again. Maria picked up the note, her hands trembling slightly. She read the words twice, her guarded heart unsure if it was enough. But before she could speak, Emma broke the silence. Daddy, Emma said softly, wheeling closer to him. You don't have to test Maria. She already passed a long time ago. She loves me. Can't you see? The innocence in Emma's voice pierced Jonathan's soul. He knelt beside her, tears brimming in his eyes. You're right, sweetheart. I see it now. I should have seen it from the beginning. Maria stood there, torn between anger and compassion. Her instincts told her to protect Emma, to shield her from disappointment. But she also saw something in Jonathan's face she hadn't seen before: vulnerability. The billionaire, the man of steel and suspicion, was crumbling before his own daughter. Over the next days, Jonathan tried again, not with grand gestures, but with consistency. He joined Maria and Emma in small moments, listening to their stories, helping with Emma's games, learning to cook simple meals alongside Maria. Each act was a step away from the man who had doubted and tested, and toward the man who wanted to trust and heal. Still, Maria's heart wrestled with conflict. Could she truly forgive him? Could she erase the sting of betrayal? Or would it always linger like a scar between them? One evening, Emma made the decision for them. She gathered both adults in the living room, her little voice serious beyond her years. I don't care about money, she said. I don't care about vaults or tests. I just want a family. Maria, you're my family. Daddy, you're my family too. Please, don't fight anymore. Don't make me choose. Her words cut deeper than any confrontation ever could. Jonathan and Maria exchanged a look, the weight of Emma's plea crashing down on them. Neither wanted to be the reason her heart broke. Maria's eyes softened as she turned to Jonathan. I don't know if I can forget what you did, but for Emma's sake, I'm willing to try. Trust is earned, Mr. Reynolds, and if you want it, you'll have to prove it every day. Jonathan nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. I will. I promise you, I will. For the first time since the truth came out, Maria allowed herself to believe him. Not because of his words, but because of Emma's light, which seemed to bridge the gap between them. And though the wound wasn't healed yet, something had shifted. Forgiveness was no longer impossible. It was simply waiting to be earned. Jonathan has taken the first steps toward redemption. But will it be enough? Maria's trust is fragile, and Emma's happiness hangs in the balance. In the final part of this story, An unexpected twist will bring everything to a powerful conclusion you won't want to miss. Time has a way of revealing the truth, not through grand declarations, but through small, steady actions. In the weeks that followed, Jonathan Reynolds began to change, not because of guilt alone, but because he finally understood what truly mattered. His billions, his empire, his power, all of it meant nothing compared to the fragile bond of trust between him, his daughter, and the woman who had become the anchor in their lives. Maria remained cautious at first, her heart still tender from the wound of betrayal. But she couldn't deny the change she saw in Jonathan. He no longer hovered in his study like a shadow of suspicion. Instead, he joined Emma's art projects, laughing when his clumsy drawings turned into silly blobs. He learned to cook more than just scrambled eggs, proudly presenting pasta dinners that Emma declared better than any restaurant. And most importantly, he spoke his love out loud, telling Emma every night before bed that she was his world. But the real turning point came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Emma had caught a cold, nothing serious, but it left her tired and fragile. Jonathan rushed home early from a meeting, ignoring calls from his office. When he arrived, he found Maria sitting by Emma's bed, gently stroking her hair, reading from her favorite storybook. Jonathan stood silently for a moment, overwhelmed. Then, as Maria finished the chapter, Emma looked up at both of them, her voice weak but clear. "Daddy, Maria, you both take care of me so much. I wish we could just be a real family." The room froze. The innocence of the request hung in the air, simple yet profound. Maria glanced at Jonathan, unsure how to respond. Jonathan's eyes filled with tears, and for once he didn't hesitate. "You're right, sweetheart," he said softly. "That's exactly what we should be. A family." He turned to Maria, his voice trembling with sincerity. "Maria, I can never undo the mistake I made. But I can promise you this. I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that I trust you, that I respect you, and that I am grateful for everything you've done. Not for me, but for Emma. You've been her angel, and I don't ever want to lose that." Maria's eyes filled with tears, the walls around her heart finally beginning to crack. For weeks she had carried anger, but in that moment, seeing Jonathan's vulnerability and Emma's hope, she allowed herself to release it. "You broke my trust once," she said softly. "But maybe people deserve second chances. For Emma's sake, I'm willing to believe you can change." Emma squealed weakly, clapping her hands despite her stuffy nose. "So we can be a family? Really?" Jonathan smiled, pulling both of them into an embrace. For the first time in years, the Reynolds penthouse felt like a home, not because of wealth, but because of love, forgiveness, and the courage to rebuild what had been broken. The shocking twist wasn't in the vault, full of millions, or the betrayal of a cruel test. It was in the miracle of trust restored, the realization that loyalty can't be bought, it must be earned. And sometimes, the greatest riches are not locked behind steel doors, but found in the hearts of those who stand by us when we need them most. From that day forward, Jonathan no longer tested Maria. He no longer needed to. Her actions had spoken louder than any proof money could buy. And as for Maria, she chose not to dwell on the past, but to look toward the future one, where Emma grew up surrounded by love, laughter, and the strength of a family built not on wealth, but on trust. And as the city lights sparkled outside their window that night, Jonathan whispered words that summed up everything he had learned. "I was searching for loyalty in vaults and contracts. But the truth is, I found it in the love of a nanny who became family." What about you? Do you believe people deserve second chances when trust is broken? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories of forgiveness and loyalty. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that true wealth is found in love, not money.